Welcome back. Next up, we are being treated to something a little bit different and quite special. Our guest speaker has called Westport home for over 15 years. An award-winning journalist who contributes to a number of national newspapers, she's also a familiar name to Mayo News readers, having written for that paper since 2006. In 2010, 3 Sunday essays she wrote for the Irish Daily Mail were included in a book entitled Who We Are, a collection of essays on life in contemporary Ireland. And in 2007, she co-wrote with local businessman Harry Hughes, Charles Hughes, Lankill to Westport, a book which was launched here by Tim Coogan. Tonight, Aine Ni Riain will take time out of her busiest evening of the week, the night the paper goes to press, to share her insights into journalism and take us behind the scenes of an industry that impacts all our daily lives. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Aine Ni Riain.
From what I've heard already here this evening, I suppose I am further confirmed in my belief that there are many parallels between good speeches and good journalistic articles or features. A good speech or a good article must be underpinned by integrity, sincerity, empathy, passion, and of course, a coherent message, argument, or statement. To make a brilliant speech, all you may need to add is a simple mantra, like Barack Obama's, "Yes, we can," or as Enda Kenny interpreted it, is féidirling. Add in a soupçon of humour or an anecdote, a personal anecdote, and it can surpass excellence. In journalism, there are many levels of writing. From a simple court report that states, for example, X was jailed for 3 months for flashing in the Carrickdon or super value in the super value fridge. Or there are colourful features and opinion pieces that allow the subjective voice intrude on the observations being made. Fortunately, since I joined the Mayo News in 2006, I've been allowed to hone very fundamental skills in both courtrooms and council chambers, and also indulge my creative parameters in opinion pieces and human interest stories. Ironically though, my career in journalism was rather a backways one, in that I suppose the seeds of it all happened back in college when I wrote some short stories and achieved small awards with that kind of writing. I also, coincidentally, represented my university in debates, but that's a very long time ago, and I can assure you I don't rate my speaking or debating skills highly anymore. My main forte, I suppose, is in writing for many years now. But anyway, I started off with some creative writing, and then back in the mid-1990s, when my children were grown a little bit, I started to contribute 2 different columns, to the occasional columns, to the Mayo News. I was living out on Clare Island at the time, and I suppose it was a form of escape for me. The columns were called Musings from the Margins and An Island Notebook, and they covered all sorts of eclectic subjects. But after I left Clare Island and moved to Westport, I started to take my writing career more seriously because I needed the money, basically. And I remember writing, one of the first pieces I wrote for the Irish Times was actually about Clare Island again, about a young rock band who were rehearsing in a sheep shed on the edge of a cliff on the island. And I think the title of the article was Rock in a Hard Place. But I remember that 400 words I wrote possibly took 2 or 3 days for me to write. you know, looking at it, writing it, rewriting it, going over it, watching it, finding mistakes. Nowadays, if I had been asked to write that article this afternoon for my Mayo News deadline, I'd probably write it in less than an hour. As time passed, I worked on as a freelance and I began to contribute to the Daily Mail. They'd opened and they'd started a newspaper here. I bought over the former Ireland on Sunday. That was a real learning curve for me. While the Irish Times, and I still contribute, play a very, one writes very, very carefully and safely. The Daily Mail likes to push out all the parameters and take risks. It likes to say it's not a red top or a tabloid, but it straddles serious journalism with tabloid style journalism pretty well. And I learned quite a few quite a few lessons working for the Mail. And I remember, you know, having various moral qualms because they'd want you to get something and you know, they expected you to go and get it. I often compared doing a job for them with being asked to go to a cliff in North Mayo, jump off it, swim over to a small island in the middle of the ocean, climb up to the top of a tree, find a bird that's about to be extinct, jump back into the sea, swim back to the mainland and deliver this to them. But they'd always say afterwards, but you forgot to do the butterfly stroke on the way out. They'd always want that extra bit blood from the story. And sometimes on a moral level, one isn't prepared to do that. For example, just before Christmas, I did a story for them, I don't know whether you'll remember, an Irish woman, a nurse from Sligo, and her Turkish partner went on hunger strike outside the Taoiseach's office in Castlebar because they were trying to adopt his nieces, and there were bureaucratic problems with it. And during that story, during my research for that story, I found out something quite explosive about that story, about the details. A human interest line that would have possibly been a front page story. The news hound in me, because that hound comes out in you know, knew how good that was, but of course I walked away from it. I do believe that other journalists wouldn't have walked away from it because they may have been in the pressurised atmosphere of a newsroom in Dublin and they would be trying to impress an editor. Fortunately, I'm older and I work on my own and I can kind of do my own thing a little bit more. The media, I suppose, has become a monster, a voracious, amoral monster that wants to be fed all day, every day, from Twitter to the internet to 24-hour news. So the parameters are pushed out more and more and more. And even here in the role of the local newspaper, I suppose, has changed and is under pressure. The Mayo News has a very, very honourable foundations. It was founded over 100 years ago by the Doris brothers. One of them was an MP, I think now, and I'm just going back to the Charles Hughes book I wrote, and the other one then was a great nationalist with, I suppose, a small n, and he took an awful lot of risks to tell the story. Westport was under court-martial at one stage, and he wasn't allowed out of the town to do his reports, but he took the risks to tell his stories. And I suppose the local newspapers are under pressure now, just like the media, and one can ask the question, who sets the agenda for the media? Is it big corporations? Is it the status quo? Is it the government in power? There's all sorts of agendas. But basically, these newspapers have to pay for themselves. And with the downturn in the economy now, you sell an ad for 1/3 or 1/4 of what you would have sold at the height of the Celtic Tiger. So journalists, newspaper editors are under more pressure to keep their advertisers happy. And sometimes we, I suppose, walk a tightrope between not capitulating to vested interests and to being true to the objective stories we should tell as a fourth estate, as an objective arm of our state. I suppose, in my view, a local newspaper or the media should be a watchdog for its readers and a provocative one, not afraid to bark and even bite at the status quo. It also should raise a smile somewhere in its pages for, I suppose, depressed people, particularly at the moment.